Peter buys a rental property. Debra puts the exact same money into the stock market. Both believe they chose the smarter path. And honestly, both of them have a pretty convincing argument, because one strategy uses leverage, cash flow, and real estate appreciation, and the other uses diversification, liquidity, and long-term compounding. But when you actually run the numbers over 20 years, the outcome becomes much less obvious than most people expect. So let's make this an honest comparison. Peter and Debra are both 35 years old. Both have $100,000 saved. Both earn $75,000 per year. Same starting point, same goal: financial freedom. But the money gets put to work in completely different ways. For simplicity, we'll assume approximately 4% annual property appreciation, roughly 10% average long-term stock market returns, and consistent contributions over time. Peter decides to build his future on tangible brick and mortar. He uses his $100,000 as a 20% down payment on a $500,000 rental property. The remaining $400,000 is financed through a 30-year mortgage at 7% interest. His monthly principal and interest payment is roughly $2,661. Peter quickly finds a tenant willing to pay $3,600 per month in rent. On paper, that leaves roughly $939 per month in positive cash flow. At first glance, the system looks fantastic. Meanwhile, Debra invests her $100,000 into a total stock market index fund. She also sets up an automatic contribution of $300 per month. No tenants, no maintenance calls, no refinancing, just automated ownership across thousands of companies. But unlike Peter, there's no physical asset she can see or drive past every day. Peter has a property and a tenant. Debra just has numbers on a computer screen. Socially, Peter looks like the obvious winner. Financially, it's far less clear. For the first few years, Peter feels validated. Rent checks arrive every month. The mortgage balance slowly declines. Nearby property values creep upward. But then the operational reality starts showing up. Now, let's actually look at the numbers through year 3. Over the first 3 years, Peter collects roughly $129,000 in rent. During that same period, his mortgage payments total roughly $95,000. So, on paper, the property appears to have generated roughly $34,000 before expenses. Sounds fantastic. Until the real-world costs start showing up. The HVAC condenser fails. That repair costs $2,800. A refrigerator replacement adds another $2,000. Then, a tenant moves out unexpectedly, creating a full month of vacancy while the mortgage payment still continues. That's another $2,661 gone immediately. And vacancies rarely come alone. Cleaning, turnover work, relisting, and preparing the property for a new tenant all create additional costs and additional time. Suddenly, the original $939 per month in cash flow starts looking very different. Because the rent check is the number everyone focuses on, what almost nobody talks about is everything that gets subtracted before the owner actually keeps any money. Maintenance, repairs, vacancies, turnover costs, taxes, insurance, and ongoing upkeep all quietly consume cash flow over time. Peter manages the property himself to save money, but now he's coordinating repairs, handling tenants, and solving problems during nights and weekends. The property is still creating wealth, but it's also functioning like an active business. After all real-world costs, Peter's usable cash flow over the first several years is dramatically smaller than the original numbers suggested. And none of that calculation includes a single dollar value assigned to his time. Meanwhile, Debra has invested her original $100,000 plus roughly $10,800 through automatic monthly contributions. That means her total contributions after 3 years equal roughly $110,000. Assuming approximately 10% annual market returns, her portfolio now sits at roughly $140,000. So roughly $30,000 of the account growth came from compounding and market appreciation. She spent 0 hours managing it, 0 maintenance calls, 0 operational emergencies. But Peter still has one enormous advantage working in his favor: leverage. Assuming approximately 4% annual appreciation, Peter's property is now worth roughly $562,000. At the same time, years of mortgage payments have reduced the loan balance to approximately $388,000. So here's the actual equity calculation. $562,000 in property value minus $388,000 remaining on the mortgage leaves Peter with roughly $174,000 in equity after just 3 years. That's the core power of leverage, controlling a much larger asset with borrowed money. By year 5, both investors finally begin feeling validated. Peter realizes appreciation is occurring on the full $500,000 property, not just his original $100,000 investment. Debra, meanwhile, begins seeing compounding accelerate as the portfolio itself starts generating larger gains. For the first time, both strategies genuinely appear to be working. And that's when something subtle happens psychologically. Peter becomes more convinced Debra sacrificed leverage for simplicity. Debra becomes more convinced Peter accepted unnecessary stress and operational risk. Now let's compare the actual numbers at year 5. Peter's growing property value and mortgage paydown have pushed his equity to roughly $240,000. Debra's portfolio has climbed to approximately $180,000. At this point, Debra has personally contributed roughly $118,000 between her initial investment and monthly deposits. That means approximately $62,000 of growth came from market appreciation and reinvested returns. Different systems, different pressures, but both paths are now starting to look successful. Now let's fast forward to year 10. Peter's property value has grown to approximately $740,000. At the same time, years of mortgage payments have reduced the loan balance enough to leave him with roughly $410,000 in equity. Here's the math. Approximately $740,000 in property value, minus the remaining mortgage balance, equals roughly $410,000 in total equity. That's substantial wealth creation from a single leveraged asset. But again, the real math includes more than appreciation. Over the decade, vacancies, repairs, maintenance, insurance increases, turnover costs, and operational expenses required years of additional contributions from Peter's salary. The wealth was absolutely real, but so was the ongoing workload required to sustain it. Meanwhile, Debra has contributed approximately $136,000 total into her portfolio over 10 years. Assuming roughly 10% average annual returns, her portfolio has now grown to over $320,000. Here's how the math breaks down. Roughly $136,000 contributed, growing into approximately $320,000, meaning nearly $185,000 of the portfolio now came from market growth and compounding. And this is where compounding finally becomes visible. For years, most of the progress came from her own deposits. Now the portfolio itself starts generating larger gains than she contributes personally. But getting there required surviving multiple market corrections, drawdowns, and long periods where progress felt almost invisible. Now comes year 20, where leverage and compounding fully reveal their long-term results. Peter's property is now worth approximately $1.1 million. After roughly $225,000 of remaining mortgage debt, he holds approximately $875,000 in equity. So after 2 decades, this is what the numbers look like. $1.1 million in property value minus $225,000 remaining on the mortgage equals roughly $875,000 in total equity. His wealth came primarily from leveraged appreciation occurring on a large asset over a very long period of time. But it also required decades of maintenance, tenant turnover, refinancing decisions, operational stress, and concentrated exposure. Meanwhile, Debra's portfolio has grown to just over $900,000. Over 20 years, she contributed roughly $172,000 total between her original investment and monthly deposits. And this is what the math of compounding ultimately created. Roughly $172,000 personally contributed, growing into just over $900,000. Meaning well over $700,000 of the final portfolio came from compounding, reinvested returns, and long-term market growth. And interestingly, most of that growth occurred during the later years. That's the strange reality of compounding. For a long time, it barely feels like anything is happening. Then eventually, the portfolio becomes large enough that even small percentage increases create enormous dollar gains. Debra achieved this through broad diversification, disciplined investing, reinvested returns, and long-term patience. But she also endured years of volatility, uncertainty, and emotional pressure along the way. At the end of 20 years, both strategies produced substantial wealth. Neither strategy was inherently superior. They simply optimized for different forms of risk. And that's the real question most people never ask. Not which investment performs better, but which system you are personally capable of sticking with for decades. Because wealth is rarely built by finding a perfect asset. It's usually built by consistently paying the behavioral price each strategy demands. And in the end, both systems relied on the exact same formula: consistent contributions, time, and disciplined behavior. This comparison is for educational purposes only and based on simplified hypothetical assumptions. It does not account for all taxes, financing structures, regional variations, or individual outcomes.